Listen, up next, we go from serial killers to photojournalism. We're going to talk Meanwhile Back in Peoria. It's a blog that is created and run by Mr. Marty Wombacher. That's his current project. We're going to talk to him about that and about all kinds of stuff that he's done in his life and career between Peoria, Manhattan, and back. I'm going to get my phone ringing right now, Vic.
Oh, yeah, just don't call Pizza Hut.
Yeah, and I won't call Derek or Mike back. Good God.
Hello.
Hey, good evening, Marty. It's Big Perm. How the hell are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing well, my man. I'm doing well. I wanted to bring in and introduce my road dog as well, Mr. Vic Nasty.
Hey, Vic. How's it going?
Good, man. Marty, how's it going?
Really good. How you doing, you nasty fellow, you?
Oh, I'm getting nastier and nastier by the minute.
I'm starting to get a little scared over here.
There ain't no need to be.
Well, hang on, Marty. Unless you're rolling through Creeve-Tucky tonight, you got nothing to worry about.
Okay, sounds good. No, I'm home, safe and sound.
Marty, it's only weird the first time.
What's that?
I said it's only weird the first time.
Right. No, usually it gets weirder and weirder, from my experiences.
Well, Marty, just to get this ball rolling, you're a Peoria native, a photojournalist, and between Peoria and Manhattan, you have written for all sorts of different outlets and also created many of your own projects. And I just want to start with your roots here in Peoria. We'll talk about Meanwhile Back in Peoria here in a bit and some of the other stuff you've done, but I want to talk roots, man. Your love for photojournalism.
It was a TV show. It was a TV show I never watched.
Me neither.
So we can't talk about that.
All right, man. Well, that's off the table then, man.
No, we can talk about it. No, really, I mean, you want to know how he got into writing and stuff?
Yeah, because, I mean, I first came familiar with you when I was doing some research on Willie York, and I found an article of his in the People of Peoria magazine, and that's where I first became familiar with the name Marty Wombacher. But I didn't realize, and that was only 3 or 4 years ago, man. But you've been doing this, for a long time, and that's what I wanted to start, just kind of start as, let's just start, I guess, with the People of Peoria, or, how you got into doing what you do.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you how it started. It was way before then, and it was a lesson I learned early on, and one that I've carried with me, is just never listen to anybody but yourself. Way back in 1985, I was working at Fleming Potter in the art department. I was a film stripper there. And a guy that I worked with, Greg Owens, I don't know, he always wanted to do like a goofy little game, just produce something ourselves. Well, at the time, Trivial Pursuit was like at its height. Again, this is 1985. So I came up with the idea of a game that would be a trivia game for like just retards. And we call it Trivial Trivia, the Idiot Edition. And basically the questions in the game was like, who's buried in Grant's tomb? How many members were in the original Jackson 5? It was questions anybody could answer. And we printed this thing up. He did the graphics. I wrote everything. This is before like I even tried to write or anything. I never went to college. And I wrote the questions. I thought of it. He kind of handled the graphics and the business end. Then we tried to get this game into stores around Peoria. And it was a satire of Trivial Pursuit, but no one got the joke. I remember do you remember Bogart's drugstore?
Oh, yeah.
That was the first place I went to try and get it in because they used to shop over there. And the manager there kind of really like berated me over it. He was like, well, these questions are so simple, anyone can answer them. And I'm like, yeah, I know, it's a joke. He's like, no, I don't, this is just, no one got that it was a satire. Well, anyway, to make a long story longer, I ended up, no store would stock it. I finally ended up, one last place. I thought I'm going to try it down at the Pure Market gift shop. If they don't want it, then fuck it, we're just not going to do it. And I went in there. Do you remember, I know you're younger than me, but do you remember Vic Burnett? He was a TV weatherman.
Absolutely.
Okay. He was in the store behind the counter, and I kind of walked in, and I'm like, hey, you're Vic Burnett. And he kind of laughed, like, yeah, I know. I said, what are you doing here? And he said, this is my store. I do this too. And I said, wow. And so I showed him the game. He immediately started laughing. He got it. He's like, oh, this is great. And I thought, finally, we can get, because I had friends of mine that wanted to buy this thing from a store. And I said, oh, great, you want to stock it? And this was in, like, November. He said, I just blew my Christmas budget, and I don't really have any money. Maybe after the New Year. And then he said these words to me, and if I wouldn't have, depending on which way I would have gone, my life would have been totally different. And I met with him after I moved back here, and I had lunch with him and told him this because he didn't even remember it. He said, you know what? He said, is it okay if I just keep this game? There's a guy I know that would really get a kick out of it. And in my mind, I'm thinking, you cheap motherfucker, you're not even going to buy him, and you asked to keep the thing. But by this time, I was, like, disgusted, and I'm like, you know what, just keep it. I don't really give a shit. And I came home, and I called Greg. I'm like, hey, Vic Burnetti's got a gift shop. And we kind of laughed about that, and I said, this isn't going to work. And we decided just to toss it in, and I never would have done anything like that again in my life. And the next day, I'm at work, some guy comes running in, and he said, hey, they were playing your game on Gene Conrad's show on WRL. He had a morning show back then. Yeah. And I said, well, I don't know. I said, it had to be something like ours, because how would he have it? I forgot that I gave that to Vic Burnett. And a couple other people said that they heard it, and so I called WRL, asked for Gene Conrad. He got on, and he's like, yeah, we've told him me and Greg did the game. And he said, our phone's been ringing off the hook. Everybody wants to buy this. Where is it? And so I told him, I said, well, nobody really gets the joke. He said, I'll tell you what, do you want to be on my show? And back then, that was like, I'd never been on the radio. I was like, wow, that was like a big deal to me. I said, yeah. He said, go back to the stores and tell them that you'll mention the stores on my show. You'll give them a free plug. And he said, I know they'll stock it. So we got it into like 20 stores, went on his show. Well, then the thing went through the roof. It started selling out everywhere. The Peoria Journal-Star did an article on us. Then two of the news stations did news bits on us. And I'm like, wow, this is as big as it's ever going to be. And then we got it in some stores in Bloomington. The Bloomington Pantograph put it on their front page, a story about us. A guy who wrote for the UPI wire service called us at work because it said we worked at Fleming Potter. And this is what just broke it crazy. He called us. He said, I've only got like 20 minutes. I'm going to do this as like a column filler, but I got a deadline. So he asked us some questions, and I said, excuse me, he wanted to get off. I'm like, what newspaper will this be in? Because I want to get a copy. He said, this is going out on the National Wire. And I said, well, what is that? You know what I mean? I know he had to think, this is just some stupid fucking guy from Peoria.
Who is this bonehead, right?
Exactly. And I kept saying, well, what is this wire you're talking about? He's like, you've never heard of the UPI? I said, I've seen it, but I don't know what it is. And then he just said, I got to go. Your lives will be different tomorrow. And he hung up. And I looked at Greg. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, what do you think that was all about? He's like, I don't know. Then I kind of forgot about it, and the next day again, I'm at work, and somebody comes running in. Oh, my God, they were talking about you on Good Morning America. They said both you and Greg's names. You did this game. No, I forgot about this. This guy did the interview, and I'm like, well, then this is back in the days when I was smoking pot and that. I put all that behind me, so I was always a little blurry. I was a little blurry anyway. And I said, it's got to be a mistake. Well, then radio stations started calling us. This thing went in like 300 newspapers and went to like every radio station. And after a crazy day of doing all these radio interviews at work because they were calling Fleming Potter because it said we worked there, the Today Show called us, a booker. And they're like, have you been booked on any talk shows yet? And we said no. Said, if you agree to do the Today Show, you can't do one up to it. You can do anything afterwards, but we want the exclusive on it. We're like, well, yeah, no one else has called. And so they had us on the Today Show. They flew us out to New York. We stayed at the Omni Berkshire. Jane Pauley interviewed us, and it just went crazy after that.
That had to be so surreal, man, coming from Peoria. Geez.
It was crazy, and it was also after, like, everybody, like I say, not only store owners, but people I knew were kind of, like, making fun of the game that we did in the beginning. And they really taught me, don't ever listen to anybody, because I thought it was a good idea. So did Greg. And people will put you down. I'm sure you've had that with your show, maybe. Like, who do you think you are? Yeah.
Yeah.
Who do you think you are having your own show? What are you, Howard Stern? And people love to do that to you. But then it goes the other way. Once it takes off, then everybody was like, oh, man, I told you that thing was going to go huge. I'm like, really? I thought you said it was stupid.
Right, douchebag. I remember you.
Right. Well, anyway, we came back, and, yeah, it was really weird because for a while, It was like anywhere I went, everybody kind of knew who I was because we had been on the Today Show and everybody watched it. So it was strange for a couple months, but that's kind of what set me off on the path. Then we did a couple joke books, And all that led me to, like, I did start writing, and I found out I really liked to write. And that led me to doing the People of Peoria. And the money that I made off the Idiot Trivia game, we sold over 100,000 of those games. We got stocked in Kmart.
Nice.
And that kind of, that led me up to, like, that was in 85, the end of 85. It really blew up in 86. And I made a decent amount of money, and I put all that money into doing my magazine, People of Peoria, I started that in 1989, and that went to 1993. And it was, at the time, we couldn't sell advertising in it. The Peoria businesses didn't really get it. I mean, we cursed in it. There was a lot of, like, dark National Lampoon-like humor going on. And, well, we did, like, a cover story on Willie York. We did one on
exactly.
the Untamed Brothers, who were a local biker gang.
Yep.
And we did a lot of stuff about Peoria that the businesses didn't really want to see reported. So we couldn't get much support in advertising, and I ended up losing all the money that I made off the game. But in turn, I did this magazine for 3 years where I was writing sometimes up to 75% of it. And so it really taught me. I mean, I always tell people, if you, like, get a guitar and you play it every day for 6 hours for 3 years, at the end of those 3 years, you're going to know how to play it.
Without a doubt, man. And you've been so ambitious through your life. I mean, you know, besides the People of Peoria magazine and the work that you did around here, I mean, you finally decided to take off and head to Manhattan.
Right.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about next was what prompted the move, you know, to head to Manhattan, I mean, downtown.
It was a funny little situation. I ended up, I was freelancing writing for the Pekin Daily Times. They had a couple editors that were really cool guys. And they let me do some kooky stories for the Pekin Times. I mean, the Peoria Journal Star never wanted anything to do with me. But
Right.
they let me write some cool features. And my editor, one time I had a copy of People of Peoria, and I brought it into the newsroom. I was turning the story in. And Kent Davey was my editor. And I gave him a copy, and he's looking through it. He said, "You ever mail this to Dick Stolley out in New York?" And I said, "Who's Dick Stolley?" And he's like, "You want to sit down, you stupid son of a bitch?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Dick Stolley is from Pekin. He went to New York. He was an editor at Life magazine. He was the founding editor of People magazine. He's now the editorial director of Time Inc." I'm like, "You're kidding me." And he said, "No, he started out writing for the Pekin Daily Times." He said, "I bet if you send him your magazines and some of your Pekin Daily Times articles, he'd really get a kick out of it." And so I did. I called Time Inc. I got his address, and I sent him a package. A week later, he sent me a really nice letter. Said, "You know, I love what you're doing. They can't believe some of the stuff you've gotten into the Pekin Times." And he said, "I can't believe you haven't been ridden out of Peoria, tarred and feathered for some of the stuff you're doing in that town." And he said, "If you're ever in Manhattan, if you ever get out to New York, I'd love to have lunch with you and meet you." And this is like, I mean, Stolley is he's retired now, but kind of an icon in the publishing world in New York. And I thought, man, I've got to meet this guy. So I waited a couple days, and I called Time Inc. and asked for him, got his office, Sally, who's his assistant. I got to know her, English woman. I asked for him, said, "Who's calling?" And I said, "It's Marty Wombacher." I sent him a magazine and a package, and he wrote to me, and he said, "You know, if you're ever in New York," he wanted to have lunch with me. I said, "Just by chance, a weird thing happened, but I'm going to be in New York next week, Wednesday and Thursday. Could I maybe have lunch with him one of those days?" And she's like, "Well, let me talk to him, and I'll call you back." And I went out there just to have lunch with him.
Right.
She called me back, and she said, "Yeah, he'd love to have lunch with you on Wednesday at the Rainbow Room at 1 o'clock. And, you know, you need to bring a coat and tie." I said, "Oh, great." So, yeah, so I bought a plane ticket, and I flew out on Tuesday night, had lunch with him on Wednesday, showed him my portfolio, and he asked how my magazine was doing. At the time, I was out of money. I was broke. And I said, "The magazine's over. I've done it for 3 years, but I don't have any money left. I spent all the stuff I made off this trivia game." And he's the one that said it to me. He's like, "Why don't you move out here?" And I never thought about it. You know, a lot of times, I guess, growing up in Peoria, it's like somebody saying, "You know, why don't you fly to Mars?"
That's pretty much what that's like.
It was. And I said, "I don't know. I never really thought about it." He said, "Well, you're single, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I had kids. I didn't have a girlfriend at the time." And he said, "You really ought to come out here." And I said, "If I did," I said, "could you get me an interview like at People or any time?" He said, "Yeah, I can get you interviews. I can't promise you a job, but I would definitely do that." So I came back here, and I went to work at Fleming Potter, kind of bummed out because I didn't have any money to get out there. I told somebody I work with, and he said, well, how much is in your pension fund? And this is how much of a dope I am when it comes to money. I said, I don't think I signed up for that. He's like, you idiot. Yeah, he's like, you don't sign up for it. We're a union. They take it out of your check every week. He said, how long have you worked here? I said, 13 years. He's like, you've got to have at least $15,000 in there. So I called the union the next morning, and I found out I had like $23,000 in my pension fund. And I said, well, how can I get that? And they're like, well, you can't. That's your retirement fund. They don't want you to take it out because it would bust the union if everybody did it. And I said, well, I don't want to wait till I retire. I want to get it like now. So what do I need to do? It's my money I put into it. It's not like they were giving it to me. And they said, well, the only way to get it would be you'd have to quit your job, and then you'd get a bigger tax on it. And I said, well, so basically what I did was the next day I went into work and put in my notice and said, I'm going to give you like a 6-week notice, but I'm going to quit and I'm going to move to New York. And everybody thought I was crazy. And I got my pension plan. I sold my car. I had like 5,000 record albums. I sold all those. Sold my furniture. Sold like all my clothes. I went out to New York with like 2 shirts, a suit and tie for interviews, and a computer. And that was it.
Wow, dude. You hear stories all the time, about people, that have these opportunities and they just don't do it.
No, that's the thing of it, yeah.
Them back. And well, obviously with you, dude, there's no fear.
No, there's a lot of fear. But you know what I have learned, and I learned it way back when I did the idiot trivia game, because that scared the shit out of me. And again, I know you know this, because you can't do something like a podcast or a magazine or write something and not be scared that everyone's going to say it sucks.
Exactly, man.
Well, you really can, and I just learned to face that fear. It's kind of a high when you do it, and it either, there's 3 things are going to happen. It's either going to suck, it's just going to be a middling thing where no one talks about it, or it'll go really big. And I've had all 3 things happen to me through the years. And if it does suck, I've learned to learn from my mistakes, kind of stand back and look at it and see, why didn't this work, or why didn't anybody like it? And there's always a lot of fear attached. In fact, I remember when I got on the plane, my last 2 nights I had spent out of my parents' house because I had to move out of my apartment. My lease was up. So I spent the night out of my parents' house sleeping in their basement. And then the day I was moving to New York, we always laugh about it, but my mom was bawling. I remember saying to her, it's like, man, it's not like I'm going off to war or something. Come on.
Right.
But it was weird. I only knew a couple people in New York, and I didn't have a job. And I remember getting on the plane at the Peoria airport and looking out the window and thinking, what the fuck are you doing? I really felt kind of sick. But
I can
got
only
out
imagine,
there,
man. You're leaving everything that you know behind for the total unknown.
Yeah, it was scary, but it was also like really one of the most exciting times ever. And so I got out there.
That's where I wanted to go next with this. Is once you got there, man, finding yourself a gig, and to go from just having a couple of shirts and like knowing 1 or 2 people to, writing articles that are published in the Post and in the Daily News. You did well, my man.
Oh, well, thanks. I appreciate that. Basically in New York, and I don't know if it's still this way because I stopped freelance writing after a while. When I moved out there, the way it worked was there was tons, and there's not that many now because of the internet. But back then, this is pre-internet. This was 1993. Right. Nobody had email. Nobody had nothing. There was a ton of weekly newspapers in Manhattan, and what you did, and they didn't pay hardly anything. You get maybe $35 for a feature article, but that's how you paid your dues. My second day there, I went around to a bunch of the weeklies. I had a portfolio that I'd built up through my People of Peoria magazine. And a lot of editors in New York really got off on the fact that I'd done my own magazine because they couldn't have done it. And they kind of liked the tenacity behind it. They're like, you did your own magazine? And they liked it. Right off the bat, I started getting work. I wrote to this newspaper called New York Weekly. I got like an assignment my second day out there. And like I say, it was $35, $50 a feature, but I started writing for New York Weekly, a weekly paper called Our Town, some other ones, just weird little stuff. And then I started doing features for New York Newsday, which was bigger at the time. But it was a daily. And I did 3 or 4 pretty big features, and they paid pretty good. They paid like between $300 up to like $800 a feature, which still, though, the money that you're throwing out when you're living in Manhattan, my money was going fast.
Man,
and I could never get a staff. Yeah, no, it's crazy, and I could never get a staff writing job. One thing that really did hold me back was the fact that I didn't go to college, and it would always come up, and it held me back. New York Newsday, but the last feature I did for them was like a 3-page feature in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, which is now kind of a hipster haven. When I went there, it was a pretty dicey area, and a friend of mine lived there, and she took me to this thing. It was Puerto Rican All-Star Wrestling. It was like this makeshift. Yeah, and it was in a kind of a rough neighborhood, and we went there, and you could buy a can of Bud for like $1 and sit in the stands and watch these local guys in these costumes. And so I did a story on that. A friend of mine was a photographer. He did the photos. It was a really cool feature. Well, my editor, Stan Mises, and I'd never met him. This is back in the days of floppy disks. I would just send him a floppy disk. His office was in Brooklyn. And we just talked on the phone, and he called me. He said, he really liked the piece. And we got to talk. He said, we've never met. We got to have lunch. I think he was sizing me up to get me a staff job, and I blew it because I do have a big mouth.
Oh, no.
And we were talking, he said, I don't even know your background. Where'd you go to school? And I said, well, if you're talking college, I really didn't go. I just went to work after high school. And he said, well, how did you end up writing? And I said, well, I just kind of like to do it, and I did my own magazine for 3 years, and I just kind of taught myself. And he said, well, you really need a journalism degree to be writing. And we kind of went back and forth. I said, well, I don't think I do. You published like 4 of my pieces. And I did. I said something like, you don't need to be, I can't remember the words I said, but it more or less like, to write for a newspaper, you don't really have to go to college. It's not that tough to do. And he didn't like that.
I bet not.
And I never, after that, I would send him pictures and that. He never called me back again.
Oh, damn.
And I wrote for the New York Daily News and the New York Post. I had a pretty steady freelance gig with Time Out New York magazine, which first started in 1994. I actually was in their first issue. But the one thing, I had to eventually get a night job at a graphics pre-press service bureau. And the one thing I did, Dick Stolley, the guy that I mentioned, he got me interviews with people in Style, Entertainment Weekly, and they were really snobby-ass people. And that didn't go anywhere. And I had lunch with him after all those 3 interviews kind of went south. He turned out to be, Dick is a really nice guy, and he would take me out to lunch 3-4 times a year, and just to talk about stuff. He kind of, I don't know, I think he kind of vicariously was living through me because I was living a weird life, and he got a kick out of it. Well, we went out to lunch after I didn't get any jobs at Time Inc. It was his way. He just kind of said, sorry, it didn't work out. And I'm like, well, it got me out here, and I'm working nights. And I said, the one funny thing was, and this happened, I said, every editor I interviewed with, because Stolley would make a call and say, you should really talk to this guy. I think he's got something. Because I was getting ready to leave, and I could tell they didn't like me. And I'd always get hit with, oh, one more thing. How do you know Dick Stolley? Like you big piece of shit. And he really laughed. I told him that, and he really laughed. He said, I wasn't going to tell you this, Marty, but after every interview, I'd get a call from the editor. They'd say, who was that guy? Why did you tell him to come here?
Who in the hell?
Kind of. But I did a lot of freelance writing. I also started a magazine in New York called Fish Wrap, which I started out as a fanzine. I was just going to ask about
that, man. I mean, a lesson in tenacity and never giving up was Fish Wrap, I would say, because you're back to writing and publishing again, your own stuff.
Yeah, which I swore I would never do. I was so burned out after doing my own magazine for 3 years. But after hitting, like I said, I was doing some freelance writing, but it really bugged me. Like, I couldn't get on it. A magazine like Entertainment Weekly, which you don't have to be, the greatest writer in the world to write for those guys. And in fact, this is what caused Fish Wrap. After I got the call back from the editor saying, well, we don't have any positions. It's just all this. I knew I wasn't going to get the job. We'll keep your resume and everything on file, and if something opens up, which, translation, we're never going to hire you.
Right.
And I just kind of, fuck, now I got to go back to working nights. And I did. I thought, you know what? And I never really read a copy of Entertainment Weekly. I thought I'm going to buy a copy and see what they're doing so great that I can't do. And I bought a copy, and I remember reading a couple of features, and it just sucked. And I thought I could do better than this. And then it was. I thought, you know what? Fanzines were real big at the time. I thought I'm going to do my own little black and white fanzine and just make fun of all these magazines and all these editors, and then send the copies to all of them.
Oh,
and
nice.
I called a friend of mine, Claire. She did a lot of the art direction for people of Peoria. And I told her the idea. I said, I just want to do a fanzine and just burn all these people and then send it to them. And I said, you want to work on it? And she said, yeah, I'd love to. So, it was mainly me and her. And the first, 6 or 7 issues were it was like a 16-page black and white fanzine that we would lay out. And then I literally would go to a copy shop, have copies made, and then I would staple them myself and then mail them to anyone that I had made fun of. And some of it got to be pretty vicious, where I was making fun of writers. But the thing that happened with that was I've always been lucky in getting press. And do you remember Sassy magazine?
I do.
Okay. I always made fun of them a lot. And after doing this for a little bit, I heard people were getting pissed off about it. But they thought it was really funny. And I came home one day from work, and one of the editors of Sassy, Christine McNeil, had left me a message, and she acted like she was crying on it. She's like, Marty, quit making fun of us in your fanzine. You're so mean. And then she said, hey, it's Christine from Sassy. You want to give me a call? We really like what you're doing. So I called her up, and yeah, we talked, and I said, how you doing? She said, she said the first issue we kind of were like, who is this fucking guy? And then she said, then with the second and the third one, we just started cracking up over this stuff and the way you make fun of all the different magazines out there and the writers. And she said, we want to make you the zine of the month in Sassy. They did that every month. And she said, how much is a subscription and whatever. So they did I was the zine of the month in Sassy. I wish I would have saved this letter. Well, it said for $1 you can get a sample issue. Well, I got like hundreds of letters from teenage girls and sent them out copies, and I got like close to 100 kids started subscribing to this thing. And one of the letters I got after a girl got the fanzine, she wrote me like a little fan letter and said, I love fish wrap. Sarcasm is my middle name. This has to be like a 13-year-old girl. And I was like 36 at the time. And she just wrote how much she thought I was so funny. And then she closed it with, so what grade are you in?
Oh, lovely.
Took you down, man. Took you down.
And I thought, I'm probably older than your parents. She thought I was like some cool high school kid.
Right.
And yeah, what grade are you in?
Holy cow, man.
So after that, I got a distribution deal. After the Sassy thing, a distribution place out of San Francisco called Big Top Publishing got hold of me, and they said, we'd love to, do you have any distribution for this magazine? And I said, no, I'm mainly just sending it to people I'm making fun of. And they said, well, if you want to get it on the newsstands, we'd love to handle it. They got 50% of the cover, which is standard. And I said, well, okay. And I said to them, I did a magazine in Peoria, and I swore I'd never do this again. And I went right back into it, and Fish Wrap Dead morphed into like a 49-page magazine where I had it printed, and we did it from 94, and then we stopped in 2000. I was so burned out by 2000, I couldn't do it anymore.
And that kind of leads us up to 2001, and that was one question, really not so much kind of about your writing, was what happened on 9/11, and you were there in Manhattan. And I wanted to ask how that event and you being there, affected your writing and your life. And was there any thing that you published about that day or about those events?
There was a couple things. I mean, naturally, it was just. Well, I mean, I always say everybody in New York and beyond has their own September 11th story. I think there's been books done of like collected stories.
Sure.
And everybody's got their own little way that they heard about it. Mine was really weird. I was working a weird shift then. I was at this again. I worked at graphics places all the time and always at nights, but I was working a 12 to 14-hour shift 3 days a week, and I was going into work like 6 o'clock at night and then coming home anywhere from 7 to 9 in the morning. but it was only like 3 days a week. It was a really great shift if you wanted to do writing and other stuff.
Sounds like my cab schedule.
It would be like a cabbie schedule, exactly. And you just knock yourself silly for 3 days, but then I'd have 4 days to do my own shit. And so I got home that day, and I was watching the Today Show in the morning, just drinking a couple beers, and I went to bed. And at the time, I didn't have a cell phone at the time, and I had a landline, which I turned the phone machine down when I went to bed in the morning, because you work weird hours too, so I wouldn't want anybody calling me. And most of my friends and family knew not to call me between 9 in the morning to 4 or 5 in the afternoon. That's when I was sleeping. And that day, my phone started clicking, and I could hear a click when somebody would call. The phone machine was turned down, so I couldn't hear the message, but I remember laying there, I was just about to sleep, and I heard a click. And I'm like, who the fuck is calling me? And then I started going back to sleep, and I heard another click. And this kind of went on. And finally, I got up and walked over to the phone machine. I'm like, what is this? And I hit it. I should have saved the tape. I mean, it would have been a little gory, I guess. But so I hit the rewind button on my machine, turned it up, and the first one was my brother Tom, and he lived in New Jersey at the time. And I lived in downtown Manhattan. And he said, hey, Marty, this is Tom calling. Just want to make sure you're okay. Why don't you give me a call when you can? Now, I didn't know what had happened. And I'm like, well, what the fuck do you think I've been doing?
What's going on?
Yeah, because he sounded all nervous. He's like, just want to make sure you're okay. And I'm like, well, I just didn't get it. And then there was the next one was my friend Alex, who I worked with. He lived in Brooklyn. And he was like, dude, I rode my bike to the Brooklyn Bridge. I saw people jumping out of the building. This is crazy. I've been drinking all morning. Call me. And now I'm like, what? So there was one message after another. People from Peoria, are you okay? Jesus, watching this on the news. But nobody said what had happened. And I didn't know. So I'm like, what the hell's going on? And I lived on the second floor of a building, and I had a little roof overhang I could walk out onto with the door. So I looked out the door, and I didn't face downtown. I faced uptown. So I looked up. I heard sirens, but you always did. And it was kind of a real nice day. And I thought, well, doesn't seem like anything's happening. And then I turned the TV on. It showed clips of the planes flying into the buildings. And I couldn't really process it. One of the guys that called me was an old boss of mine, Joe Friedman, who actually published this book of mine. And it was hard to get a line out, but I got a line to him. He was living upstate at the time, and he answered, like, Joe, this is Marty. Oh, my God, are you okay? And I'm like, what's going on? He said, you don't know? I said, I got up to all these weird messages, and I was seeing planes, flying in. I didn't know it was the World Trade Center. He told me. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me. Well, then I called some people back, got hold of my parents, told everybody I was okay, and then I did. I walked down there. There was throngs of people walking down there. After 14th Street, all the traffic was shut down. So it was really surreal. There were helicopters flying overhead. On the corners were all the news people, that you'd see on all the national. They were all on the corners doing their reporting. And I walked down as close as you could get. And you'd see people walking around that had soot on them that maybe were in there or whatever. I really kind of freaked out. And I started walking the other way, and I ended up in a bar called the Stone Crow, just sitting there watching it on TV. And it was just a weird night. And I mean, how it affected me was, I don't know if it affected me that much. I've always been the kind of guy that just kind of lives for the day. But that more than ever, you do learn. It's like, you better pack as much in every day as you can, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Well, and Marty, that seems to be what you've done with your life, man. I mean, just in the last 3 years, just fast forwarding a little bit, you've created all sorts of different blogs. You've moved back here to Peoria in 2012. Now your current project is, meanwhile, Back in Peoria, which is basically you discovering the people and places of Peoria that you've missed or haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun rediscovering the town. I mean, when I did the magazine People of Peoria, I discovered so much stuff. You have to when you're doing stuff, and I'm sure you're finding it too. You got to start looking around. And, I mean, I've always hated these people that talk about Peoria and, oh, there's nothing to do here. It sucks. Well, to me, it's like, well, if that's the way you feel, then get out of here. Go somewhere else. Either find something to make this town better or more fun, or find somebody else that's doing it and support them. but don't sit around and complain about it. I mean, because I hit a point in '93 where I'd done my magazine. I did kind of feel like I took Peoria at that point, because there was no internet or any option like that I'd taken everything I could do as far as I could, and I wanted to get out, and I did. So I moved. So coming back, it was kind of like, I looked around and saw nobody was really, I mean, there's a lot of blogs going on and stuff, but I didn't see anybody doing a daily blog that really kind of celebrated the city, where you go out and you do stuff and you interact with people. And I thought, well, I could come back and do that. And that's kind of what I've done. It's been such a blast doing it. I've met so many people that have become friends, and just seeing new stuff. Like, I love all the stuff that's going on, like, around Main Street, all the shops, and, like, the Broken Tree Coffee. I mean, old shops, like the Costume Trunk. Have you ever been in there?
Oh, yeah. I bought my very first Perm wig there at the costume shop.
Did you really, from Steve Spain?
Yep.
Yeah, it's one of those things. When I started the blog, I started, like, really opening my eyes, because I got to think of different stuff to do every day. And going to work one day, I drove by, and I thought, I've never been in that place. Then I went in, and Steve's a great guy. We talked. I did a blog. Since then, I've done a number of blogs from, like, the Costume Trunk, which isn't, it's been on the block forever. But there's also Around the Corners Urban Artifacts, which is a really cool store.
That is such a cool place, man.
Have you been there?
I've not been in it. I drive by it all the time, and I see the stuff in the windows. And with my schedule, they're never open when I'm awake.
Right. Yeah, I know. They have an odd schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you get a chance, go in.
Reading your blog for a while now, would you consider yourself a bit of a foodie?
A bit of a what?
A foodie.
Oh, I thought you said a bit of a fruity. What are you trying to say here?
Way to go, Vic. Insult the guest, man. Jesus.
Hey, what the hell? But I see you cover a lot of different places where you go and have dinner or lunch or breakfast or what have you. Would you consider
I mean, I don't know if I'm so much a foodie. I'm just a guy that just likes to eat. And I have discovered there's so many good places around here to eat. It's funny because I got friends of mine. I mean, I was in New York for 19 years, so I made a lot of really good friends. And like the one thing right now, what I'm doing is I'm doing 52 weeks of pizza. I'm going to a different pizza place for a whole year. I'm in my 13th week. And I've had friends of mine email me, and they're like, wow, you guys have, because in New York, the pizza's all the same, pretty much. I mean, there's a couple, huh?
It's all the New York style, right?
It is, and they all taste, I mean, it's good. They all taste the same. You get a slice, there's a pizza place on every corner, but it's all kind of the same recipe, whereas here, they're all different. I mean, you got, Agatushis, you got Sugar now, which is new. I went out to Luca Grill in Bloomington, which is great. There's just so many different places, and I have found people are really opinionated about food. I ate 20 tenderloins in 20 weeks. That was my last little marathon, and people had a lot of opinions on that. We should go here. Oh, that place sucks. No, this place is. People would get on little arguments on Facebook and stuff over it. So I like
Marty,
to eat.
I love tenderloins, man. What was your favorite?
I had two favorites. There was a tie. You been to Kenny's West Side Pub?
Yes, sir.
Okay, their tenderloin there is fantastic. Theirs was good, and there's a place a friend of mine, Kevin, took me to. It's called the Boar's Nest out in Athens, Illinois. It's a little bit of a trek, but it's worth it. The tenderloin was great. I've heard their other food. I'm going back out there. They have pizza, too, so I'm going there for pizza. But that was really good. So it was the Boar's Nest.
Yeah, they said that's where Lindbergh crash landed one time out in Athens, Illinois. We had to have his airplane fixed, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you have to look into that.
Yeah, I will. So, food's been a big thing. I go to a bar about once a week, usually on Thursdays. Like last week, I went with a friend of mine, Justin Glaw, who you had on the show.
Yep.
Justin and another friend of ours, Amber, and I went to the Irish Villa last week. And that turned out to be a blast. He made these lemon shots that he set on fire. And every time you do a post, because I'm kind of going, I mean, a lot of people that blog in that, they don't interact with people. They just kind of write about stuff. But I go and really, do stuff. And I tell everybody, it's kind of a little bit like doing an improv act, because you never know what's going to happen. And usually it either goes really good or it goes really bad. But either way, it really turns out to be an interesting night. And, like, we had a ton of fun at the Irishville. I mean, it's a place that's been there forever. And
I grew up on the 2900 block of Northeast Adams, just a couple blocks down the street from there.
Yeah,
and
you grew up right next to it then.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've been in there, right?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, really cool place.
Oh yeah, man. And I don't know how to describe it, man. It's definitely an atmosphere unto its own. And if you've never been to the Irish Villa, it's down there like on the 3000 or the 3100 block of Northeast Adams. You got to get down there.
Yeah, it's right down the street from Goatees.
Yep.
And they keep weird hours there, is why it's hard to get to. They don't open till like 4 or 4:30, and then a lot of nights they close at 9.
And that's
even
the
on
tough part
Fridays.
about it. You know, I drive by a lot and it's closed, and there were periods of time where I thought that they were closed, and then I pick up a trip and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to the Villa," and it's like, "Oh, they're open."
Right.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I thought for a long time too that they were just shut down, and no, they're still going. Bob Buchanan, I met him. He's the owner. His wife is the bartender there. They're really fun couple. We had a really good time in there. It is when you tell somebody you're doing a blog and they start getting a little attention. It turns out to be a lot of fun. I mean, the first successful blog I did in New York was it's called "The Guy Walks Into 365 Bars," and I went to 365 bars in 365 nights, and that was a wild year. Yeah, that was crazy. It was nuts, and the deal was I made rules for it too. I had to go to a bar for at least an hour, have at least 3 drinks, and if you Google 365 bars, it'll come up. But I started it on January 10th of 2010, I believe, and then into January. I did the last bar here. I went to Mike's Tavern in West Peoria. That was the last bar.
Yeah, I just pulled it up now. If you go to Marty's current blog, meanwhile, backinpeoria.com, and go to the About page, on that About This blog page, there's links for A Guy Walks Into 365 Bars, Marty After Dark, and Trippin' with Marty.
Yeah.
Are you out in the cornfields, doing hallucinogens or what?
I was about 20 years ago. Such days are past me, but I called it Tripping with Marty. And with that, I would take little trips around New York, go to places. I mean, it was a double entendre on the whole tripping thing, but
right.
My days of eating acid for breakfast are over. That ended sometime in the 1980s. I can't remember when, but luckily
goodness,
I made it.
Well, Marty, listen, we've just got maybe 3 or 4 minutes left with you tonight.
Okay.
I've had a ball talking to you.
Me too. It's fun talking to you guys.
Fuck yeah, man. We'll have to do this again sometime soon. I wanted to throw it over to Vic Nasty just to get any last words from him.
Marty, I look forward to your next blogs, and I did not call you fruity. I just wanted to be clear on that.
I know. I was just kidding with you.
That still remains to be seen, but we'll see.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Marty, I want to throw it over to you then, man, and just give you any last words, let people know how they can get in contact with you and all that good jazz.
Okay, so meanwhile back in Peoria.com. Basically, I mean, if you can't get that to that, or if you just Google Marty Wombacher, it comes right up. And I got an email contact on there. I have people, this happened last night. Somebody sent me a message on Facebook, and he was friends with Justin, and his name's Ryan. Said, "Hey, where are you going tonight? I wouldn't mind meeting you." And I went out to Last Chance. That'll be tomorrow's blog. And he showed up. We met. We had a couple beers together. So I'm meeting people all the time. I mean, anybody wants to meet up and hang out, just send me an email. I'm always looking to meet crazy people out there. So I really appreciate you having me on the show. It's been a lot of fun. I love your podcast. You're doing a great job with it.
Well, thanks, Marty, and it definitely makes me feel like I'm not wasting my time on a Sunday night. That's for sure, brother.
Oh, no, you're not. No, I've been listening to it. So I listened to one of my old pals, Bloody Mess.
Oh, yeah, man. I love that guy.
Yeah, I heard. That's when I started listening to your podcast. He was on there. I think I saw it on Facebook, and I listened. No, you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you, man. And coming from you, that means a lot. It truly does.
Oh, well, thanks. No, keep up the good work. I'm trying to spread the word myself, so.
Well, hey, we truly appreciate any and all help that we can get in doing that. That is for damn sure, man.
But, happy to do it.
for myself and Vic Nasty and all of our listeners tonight, again, we want to thank you for taking the time out to talk to us, and we're going to send you out
a really good time.
Good deal, man. Have a great night, Marty.
Take care, guys. All right, thanks.
Later.
All right, we'll see you.
Someday, you gotta find another way. You better write your mind and live by what you say.
Vic Nasty, that was Mr. Marty Wombacher, dude. What a fun guy.
Hell yeah, great segment. Can't wait to read his future blogs.
No doubt, man. And I'm definitely going to have to send him a message and make sure that we hang out sometime on a Sunday or a Monday, when I got the night off.
There you go.
And again, everybody, check out the blog. It's